Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, AI with Purpose. I'm Brian Washburn. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Endurance Learning, and I love that you've joined us for today's session. I have over 2 decades of experience in the world of learning and development, and I've seen a lot of different technologies come and go, and some of them have stayed, right? So we have PowerPoint has stuck around. We have things like Storyline, which has transformed e-learning and stuck around. AI, and we were just talking about this before the session. I was talking about this with the other facilitators. AI has been the hot new buzzword for 2 years. It is here. And so we're going to talk about this. Now, we're talking about not just AI, but AI with purpose. So, kind of making sure that there's that human piece to it. A few months ago, I was visiting my oldest child in college in Montreal, and they love theater. And so I was about to buy some tickets to go to the theater with my oldest child. And I asked ChatGPT because I knew this was kind of a French forward speaking part of Canada. I asked, is this play in English? And it said it was. We got to the play, we went in, the music started, and the dialogue started, and it was in French. And so, one of the things about AI is that it can give us some great information. It can make life a lot easier, a lot faster, and there really is a human element that we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of. And so, with that said, that's going to be today's webinar, and I am joined here by several other people who will be sharing some information and some of their experiences with AI as well. Erin Clarke is our Director of L&D Client Relationships here at Endurance Learning. She has over 15 years of experience managing the organizational learning function with corporations and works with our clients to create meaningful learning that leads to change. I'm also joined by Heather Mason. Heather is an L&D leader, and we've had a chance to work very closely with her at Endurance Learning. She's an L&D leader with over 15 years of experience designing scalable training programs. She specializes in the cutting edge of Gen AI adoption. So she's going to be a really good person both to present some information, but also if you have questions in the chat, go ahead and add those in there as well. She has worked on successful internal AI bot development and Gemini rollouts and organizational change management. So if you'd like to connect with her, you can find her on LinkedIn, and her email address is right here on your screen as well. There's a third person who you won't actually see or hear from, but she's kind of behind the scenes making this whole webinar happen. Rachel Niles is our quality assurance manager. We'll refer to her several times throughout the course of today's session. She's going to be helping in the background from posting resources to handling questions in the chat. She's what actually makes this session run. So I see that people are already putting some introductions into the chat, which is great. Keep those coming. If you would like, and we had this QR code up on the screen before, but this is the link to our Endurance Learning LinkedIn page where if you're interested in just kind of following us, we'll post information up there, whether it is a blog post about something new that we're finding, or it could be just something that happened maybe on a webinar that we're highlighting and sharing out with our network, or it could be some information about a project that we're working on that might inspire you in the projects that you're working on as well. If you would like to stick around for the whole entire webinar, at the end of today's session, we do have several giveaways. One will be your choice of one of the books that I've written, Instructional Design on a Shoestring, or What's Your Formula? The other giveaway is to one of our e-learning courses. So we have a whole series of courses under our L&D Pro label. And one of those courses is about the foundations of L&D. So if you're relatively new to the world of learning and development, that might be a course that you'd be interested in. We also have several courses out there about training delivery and training design. And so at the end of the session, we'll do a drawing. You'll get to choose, if your name is chosen, which of those courses might work best for you. Now, I see that people have already started putting your names and where you're from into the chat, which is great. If you could just add one more thing in there, just to give us an idea of who is on this call today. So if you're using AI, we would love to hear, what are you using AI for? And it could be work related, it could be something that you're doing personally. But I think that we have a wide range. We have over 200 people who are on this webinar right now. We have a wide range of experiences using AI. And so we'd love to just hear what it is that you're using AI for, which will help us in our minds picture, what is people's experiences with AI. And hello to all of you who are joining from Seattle or Pacific Northwest. That's where Erin and I and Heather are all joining from. And my hometown is Rochester, New York, not too far from Buffalo. So go Bills, beat the Texans this evening, is my main non-training related message for today. As you're sharing some of the ways that you're using AI into the chat, and please keep that coming, I just want to share a little bit more about what you can expect from today's session. So the first is, like I said, we have a wide range of people who are with us today, and AI may mean different things to different people. So we're gonna start by level setting and kind of sharing how we define AI or how that term is going to be used for today's webinar. You might not use it outside of today's webinar, but we want to make sure that in this webinar, everybody's using that term in the same way so we can have a productive conversation. Also, we're going to talk about how AI and instructional design can be integrated, and we're going to use the ADDIE model, which is probably the oldest instruction design model out there. I know there's some other models that are out there that people might choose to use, but we're going to use ADDIE because it's generally the standard, and it gives us a good structure to have a conversation when it comes to instructional design. Finally, we're going to have a discussion towards the end of today's session, and we hope that you'll join us in the chat with this discussion about how AI may assist in overcoming your instructional design challenges. So we'll be talking about that. One warning that I do want to put onto today's webinar is that there will be no breakout discussion inside of today's session. Now, if you've been with us in previous webinars, one of the hallmarks of the webinars that we traditionally facilitate is that we have a chance for people to get into small groups and breakout rooms during the session. As we were planning this session, when we saw the registration, how big the registration was, how much we had to share about this session, we realized we wanted today's session to really be more of a show and tell. And so with that, what we're going to do is in the chat, Rachel's going to drop a handout that can be used in today's session. Now, this is a PDF, but it's a fillable PDF, so you can take notes right in this section. As Heather and Erin and I talk a little bit more about different ways that we use AI or that it can be used, you might want to start to think, oh, these might be some prompts that I can use for my own situation, or maybe something that we say will spark an idea in your mind that you'll be able to use in your own situation. So over on that right-hand side of this document, go ahead and start to take some notes and have that document handy, because at the end of today's session, we're actually going to ask you to share some of the things that you're jotting down throughout the course of this webinar. So that's going to be the principal interactive piece to today's webinar. Will be an opportunity for you to listen, to take notes, to have some ideas sparked, and then towards the end of today's session, we're going to ask you to share back some of the things that you've been noting down. Excuse me. Now, when I mentioned that there will be no breakout rooms today, I saw that there were some thumbs up and some hearts reactions that people were giving. And so I didn't see any crying emojis, but for those that really, really wanted to have some breakout experience, we actually are planning a part 2 to today's session. And that's going to be called AI in Action. It will take place 3 weeks from today on Thursday, December 11th. At 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. And this is going to be an opportunity to take some of the things that you're learning today and actually try them out and generate a work product that you'll be able to use after that session in your own context. So I hope that you'll join us. Feel free, I'll post this again towards the end of the webinar, and this information will be up on our website as well. I see that Rachel dropped that into the chat as well. All right, so all of those announcements are out of the way. I want to actually, because Heather has so much experience kind of bringing AI into organizations, I'm going to start just by asking Heather if you can help us out just by giving us a definition for what we should be thinking about when we think of AI.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And hi, everyone. It looks like from looking through your chat answers, there are people who have no experience with AI and people who are already using it. in your daily personal life and in your professional life. So or artificial intelligence is the broad umbrella term for computer systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. So that's things like recognizing images, making decisions, understanding speech. Actually, most of us are using AI dozens of times a day, and we're not fully realizing it probably because until recently, AI wasn't really talking back to us. So I'll give you an example here of Netflix. And Netflix gives you recommendations, right? This is AI powered. All right, let's talk about LLMs, which stands for Language Learning Model. This is a specific type of AI designed to understand and generate text or images or videos or songs you might have caught if you were in the waiting room. Brian's generated song. This LLMs are also known as generative AI because they generate. Either new text or images or songs or whatever it is. And one thing to really note that I think is very important to our conversation today and your work as you play around with generative AI, content generation is predictive with LLMs. It doesn't learn in the way that humans do by understanding concepts. Instead, it's actually learning statistical patterns based on the data it's been fed or given access to. So I would love to just hear from you all what kinds of generative AI tools you might be using, if any. I think we have a poll to pop up here. If other, please let us know in the chat what your other is. I see an interesting comment from Gina here in about AI is scary when topics I discuss is, out loud is now flooding my social media. Yeah, I've been experiencing a lot of that too. Um, Shopping for things, right? It's things are popping up or whatever it may be. Okay, I see a lot of perplexity. Articulate Rise. Yeah, they have their AI assistant, uh, Vanva, Figma AI features, Grok, Canva, Synthesia. I haven't heard of that one yet. Camtasia, Powtoons. Yeah.
Synthesia is a cool. You can kind of create AI generated videos. So you have
Mm.
like an avatar kind of talking, but it's a human avatar that kind of talks through some things for e-learning, for video production, things like that. It's really neat.
Oh, fun. Yeah, there are so many cool things coming out, and a lot of organizations have been working on their own. Okay, what do we have here? Chat GPT, 72%. They just released 5.1, by the way, if you've been playing around with that. Gemini, 22. Copilot, 51%. For those of you using Copilot, is that coming from specifically work directives, or is that something that you're just playing around with as part of your workflow? Pops up at work. Yeah. Copilot mandated. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Work directive, only thing available. Interesting. All right. Thanks. I'll turn it back over to you, Brian, for the next part.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. And so we have some ideas in terms of how to align just on AI. And you're giving us some ideas in terms of how you're using AI and what tools you're using it for. Now, I saw in as people were writing in the introduction, some people said, I just want to know a little bit more about how to use AI in work. And so let's talk a little bit about that now. So let's talk about aligning on Addy first. So this is one of those concepts that is universally used. It can be a little controversial. Some people feel it's a little bit too rigid or structured or ordinal, and doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. Addy, it's a model. It's one of those things where some models are, all models are wrong, some models are useful, right? And so the idea that we need to follow something step by step, that's not necessarily what this is. But when we talk about Addy, what we're talking about are five different elements to instructional design. And so that first element is the analyze phase. So what's the problem and what's the solution that we're going to try to find? Design is creating a sketch or an outline of that solution. And then we get to the develop phase, which is the almost learner ready materials. And so when we talk about develop, we're talking about getting ready to put things that are just about ready to be put in front of the learners, but we still have some flexibility to make some changes. Implement is pushing stuff out in front of the learners, bringing the solution to the learners. And finally, the last E in Addy is how effective was that solution? This is one of the areas where people find fault in the Addy model because when you take a look at it, it looks like it's sequential. The idea with evaluate and how effective was the solution, even though that falls at the end of the acronym and at the end of this model, it's not something that you should wait to think about until the very end, right? We should be thinking about evaluation and kind of what success means from the beginning, from that analysis. And so I kind of see Addies as kind of a circle or some almost like a squiggle because you will be kind of moving back and forth depending on how your project runs. Now, that said, let's take these one at a time and start to think through how can we use AI tools. And I'm going to show you some examples of having used ChatGPT to put in some prompts and to help me through a few different work situations. And so the first one I'm going to talk about when it comes to analyzing something using AI is really kind of sometimes we just have a general issue that we need to think through. And if it's just us, and I don't know how many people have joined us who are kind of training departments of one or small training departments, but if it's just us, sometimes it's really difficult to get out of our own heads. And so sometimes we just have a challenge and we're not quite sure where to go. And so one example of this could be, I have 35 trainers on my team who are SMEs, right? They're subject matter experts, but they're not experts in adult learning, in training, and facilitation. People they go out, they're experienced. They've been doing this, some of them for decades. And yet some of the feedback that we get is they give us good information, but they're kind of boring. It's lacking in terms of the sessions, or I don't know how much I actually use. There's great stories, but I don't know how much I actually use afterwards, right? And so that could be a typical situation that you might just have some general thoughts, and you can use AI to figure out, okay, what should I do with this? And so in the example that I'm giving you, this is a prompt that I would have. And so in that handout, we gave you some sample prompts. And those sample prompts are pretty simple in terms of language. When it comes to AI, one of the things that is really helpful is the more specific we can get in the way that we're asking for some help, the better, the more targeted that help is going to be. And so here, what I typed in was we have 35 trainers on staff who are SMEs, but don't have a background in adult learning. People like the information they have to present, but we hear a lot of feedback that the sessions are boring. How might we be able to help these trainers make their sessions more dynamic, right? So this is an analysis piece to me because we have some general data. And I need to start thinking through what could be a solution for this. And so when I typed this in and hit enter, I got a 5-part response that could help me analyze or move beyond this situation. So it gave ChatGPT gave me these 5 pieces. So it all starts with helping to reset their mindset. You don't have to be a trainer to be engaging. And then it gives me give them some quick wins and actually gives me some examples of ways that we might be able to find some quick wins for our trainers and then give them a simple, repeatable session framework. So give them some structure And then it says practice without pressure. So having people just kind of doing some sessions and seeing if they can get more engaging using some of these tools. And finally, measure and share the wins, right? So it gave me this five-part possible solution to this. Now, this is great, and this happened within the course of 5 seconds, right? What took the longest was me typing in that prompt. Now, one of the things that we need to keep in mind, though, is that it is so fast and looks so good on the surface, but we can't forget the human element here, right? So a big question is this the right solution? What if our subject matter experts need more than just performance support? Because those five pieces, there is no formal training that was involved in that. And sometimes that can be the best solution, but sometimes what happens if we need to give more than performance support? Is this the right solution that it's offering to me? What if we knew that the only way we could make sure that everyone was introduced to these strategies was through an in-person session? What if our SMEs are dispersed? What if our SMEs already have these tools, right? So one of the things that we need to always keep in mind is that when we're enlisting the help of AI, it doesn't always have the context, right? It doesn't know our situation. It doesn't know our learners. So those are some things to keep in mind as we generate some quick responses from an AI tool that there's still some thought that needs to go into the response that it gives us. Now, a second option or a second scenario where we might be able to use AI to analyze a situation might be when we have some specific data. And I see that where people are being asked to post the handouts again. So Rachel, if you have that link and can help people out, that would be great so that people can type some of these things in. And sometimes you might just want to type in some of the prompts that we're using as well. And so what happens if we have that first scenario I gave you was general. Now what happens if we have some specific data? Sometimes we get data and it's telling us a story, but we're not sure what that story is. And so AI can be a really, really helpful tool to help us think through, okay, I have a lot of numbers, they don't look good, but what is this story that this data is telling us? And so here I'll give you an example of maybe if we had survey results from an annual employee satisfaction survey, right? So let's say that we have a data set. Now, what do we do with this and how can we have AI help us? Well, one of the things we can do is upload this to our AI tool and say, scan the attached employee survey data and tell me what might be a training issue, what might be a non-training issue. For the training issues, suggest some specific topics to focus on. For non-training issues, suggest non-training ways to make improvements, right? So that's a pretty detailed prompt. And I've uploaded a document that has data. And again, within moments, what I was able to generate is a summary. So AI kind of took a look at the data and right away gave me a summary and gave me kind of its own interpretation, where areas are weak, where there's might be a moderate need to address something, what's reasonably strong, what's a possible concern, right? So that we have a variety of things that it's interpreting or giving us some immediate feedback on. And then it gave me several areas where we might need some specific formal training and possible topics to cover. It also gave me some suggested non-training solutions, right? All of this just because I put a prompt in there, which is super, super helpful when it comes to a needs analysis. Now, that said, we want to come back to this theme that we can't forget the human element, right? We have some data, but AI can't do one-on-ones, right? It was just looking at a spreadsheet. It doesn't know what people were actually saying. Yes, it can come up with some survey questions. Yes, it can even read qualitative feedback. Perhaps it can branch to some follow-up questions, but it can't read body language. It can't establish rapport. It can't develop a relationship with people. AI can't shadow people doing jobs. It can't conduct focus groups. It can't dig for honest responses. So when we ask AI to analyze some information or some data for us to do a little bit of that needs assessment, we need to keep in mind that, as Heather mentioned, it's giving us predictive responses, but it's not giving us kind of that human touch, whether it is developing relationships so we can get more honest responses, or just kind of being able to take a look and see what's going on in the first place. So those are a few ways that AI can be helpful in the analysis phase, and a few things we're going to want to keep in mind as we start to get some responses back from AI. As we even mentioned in the description for the session, as we're mentioning throughout the course of this webinar, AI can be super helpful and super fast. And if we go too fast, we might miss something. So just keep that in mind. And that's why we want to make sure that we have that human element in there as well. So let's move on beyond the analysis piece into design, right? And so one of the things, and this is one of the things that I saw a lot of people mention when they said, how are we using AI? And they said, it's helping me create lesson plans. It's helping me to do some other things. AI is wonderful. It's a wonderful tool for ideation. And I say that this is also known as it eliminates the need to stare at a blank screen. And for me, I know that before I had access to something like a ChatGPT or a Gemini, if I had to create a training session, I could sit there and stare at my screen, and I would have coworkers when I worked in an office. I would have coworkers walking by wondering, "What are you doing? You're just staring at your screen." And that was me just trying to come up with an idea for a training session. And with ChatGPT or Gemini, I can type something in like this, right? So create a lesson plan. And this is a very niche example. Create a lesson plan for a 45-minute training that introduces customer service reps in a tire center to the Michelin Defender tire. So we're talking about a very specific product and equips them with key features and benefits of the tire and the ability to overcome customer objectives to both price and the idea that they just prefer to go to the same tire they've always had on their car. This should be engaging, but not touchy-feely, because we're training people who have been working in the automotive industry and selling tires for up to 50 years. This is a very specific prompt, right? And so if you have very few times do we have a chance to do a training session where it's just a general training session. We always have context. And so the more context we can give to the prompt, the better of a response we're going to get. And when I typed this in, it gave me a lesson plan right away. It gave me an overview. It gave me some learning objectives here. It gave me activities that we could use, which was, and I'm taking a look at this. Actually, if you can see this and I'm not sure how big your monitors are, but if you can see that hook question, that's something that jumped out at me immediately, right? So it gave me this really fast, but if you take a look at that hook question, it's not a question I would ever use. I don't think it's a good question for this. But it gave me something. It gave me a starting point. And from that starting point, I can start to massage some of the ways that we want to do things, whether it's kind of change up an activity or change up the wording to a question we're going to ask. But at least it gave me some place to start, so I'm not staring at my computer for 30 minutes. So just be careful with the lesson plan. You know, what I asked for was very targeted, but I also said it's a 45-minute session. I gave it a lot of things that it was supposed to do. And when I take a look at it a little bit close, like it looks great on first look. But when I took a look a little bit more closely, that 30 to 40 minute mark, it's 10 minutes for mini practice, real customer scenarios. How many of us can do a role play activity where we give instructions, where we break people up into small groups, where we have them actually do the role play, where they give each other peer feedback, and then we come together and do a debrief all in 10 minutes? That's a really tough ask. And that's what it's suggesting that we do here. So that's one of the other things when it comes to ChatGPT or AI. It gives us these things that are very, very quick, but we want to make sure that that we're kind of laying human eyes on it to make sure it's what we need and it's going to be effective. Another design element to be mindful of when using AI is learning objectives for this very specific reason, right? So create a 4-hour training on a customer service for an IT department. Here we have some learning objectives. That's a pretty general prompt, and it gives me learning objectives that are sound, right? These are learner-centered, the participants will be able to do. These are action-oriented, they're observable. So they're well-written learning objectives, but they might not be the objectives that I really want because I didn't put very much information into that prompt. And so I might say, you know what, actually with this particular thing, I have an agenda that I need to hit. And really, one of the issues that we're having with this IT department and customer service is that people aren't being very specific in their tickets. And so I can adjust this prompt. Now, the issue is we can give an AI solution or an AI tool a number of different revisions to our prompt, and it won't always just make slight adjustments. It gave me a whole new set of learning objectives. And when I took a look at this, I like the objectives for numbers 2 and 5, right? They get into the tickets. But I also liked the original objectives of 1 and 4, right? So when we start to create something with AI, there's going to be a mix of using the speed that it can give us an answer to with what we actually need the outcome to be. So I'm going to actually ask Erin to share a little bit more about some of her experiences when it comes to some of the next steps in Addie, beginning with design.
Yeah, so we're talking about the development piece, right? You're walking through the design part, Brian.
You are absolutely right. So, before I get into the development piece, there's one more thing, and this actually goes back to one of the things that I was talking about with development or with the analysis piece. Is sometimes we can actually upload a document and say, create a training based on this document. And so I uploaded a document that had an agenda for a train the trainer program. And it gives me a whole lesson plan just because I uploaded a PDF of a document. Super cool. And at the same time, when it comes to the human piece to this, we need to make sure that what it generates is something that our trainers are equipped to actually facilitate. Sometimes it will generate something that we ask it to be highly interactive, but the people who are actually going to deliver it aren't equipped, aren't experienced enough to deliver or to facilitate some of those things. So AI tries to predict what it is that we want. It often does a good job, but it does leave some holes, which are bigger. Some holes are bigger than others, or sometimes it remembers something that we asked it to do 2 days ago, and wants to keep putting that into some of the things we're asking it to do going forward. So those are some things just to ways that AI can be really helpful with instructional design, and some things we might want to think about. Erin, now I'm going to toss it to you for develop.
Perfect. Happy to talk more about development and AI. Thanks, Brian. You know, when we think about developing, AI can assist in developing our content by helping us generate a lot of different things like facilitator guides, case studies or scenarios, handouts or resources, or even slides. And it can do all of those things in accordance with style guide instructions or the specific parameters that we feed it, the things that we tell it to do. So, for example, we oftentimes when we're working with a client or on a project, we create a bot. And Brian, if you want to go to the next slide, in this case, we created a Gemini gem that can act as a partner instructional designer as we're working on, again, a project or a specific client. So the bot usually has things like the style guide and the key source material that we have so it can stay really focused. And we'll show an example of how we created a case study for our specific client. So we can ask our bot to create a case study scenario with the particular parameters. And we're going to share a chat, or excuse me, a prompt in the chat that you can use. It's much more generic than what you see on the screen. But essentially, what we want to prompt our AI to do is to create a case study type scenario where learners get a chance to, and then you'll add in your learning outcomes. What do you want them to do? And the case study should highlight the pertinent information that is to this case study or this project or this specific learning outcome, and follow the style guide or whatever parameters you tell it to. And these are things we should be thinking about, like how long do we have? If we only have 5 to 10 minutes for this case study discussion, we may want to prompt this should be a paragraph long so that learners can spend a minute reading it and then the other 8 to 9 minutes discussing in their groups. Maybe you have 45 minutes to discuss, and so this can be a much more elaborate case study. So we want to feed it as much information as we can to help with those parameters. So in this case, the result was a case study scenario with discussion questions for small groups. And we had to go back and forth a little bit with the bot to get where we needed it to be, but we were able to produce a a case study that had, again, those discussion questions. It had the background information and then the discussion questions for learners to use. So another thing that AI can help with when it comes to developing materials is acting as another set of eyes. So for example, we can ask it to simplify the text and bring it closer to, in this case, an 8th grade reading level, or to revise it with an active voice and again, change the reading level. So these prompts are things that we can use to help us double check and edit our work, and they really help us to reduce that cognitive load. So you still might have to refine a few times. And one of the, maybe I'll say great things about AI is that you can refine your prompt or change your prompt, like a bajillion times. And it doesn't usually get upset with you. In fact, it'll often praise you or thank you and say things like, wow, that's a really great point, and then refine the parts that we need it to refine. So I'll even, as we're talking about ways we can use AI to develop an instructional design, Brian has said this many times. We'll continue to say this throughout this webinar. We can't forget the human element. So in those examples we shared of refining sentences, we'll still need to read the sentences that AI generates to make sure that they make sense. In the case study example I showed, we'll still need to review and edit it. There was in the first generation of the first version had a reference to an electronics manufacturer when really the content was about textiles. Sometimes AI kind of hallucinates a bit. And then later in the output, there was a random company name, and we had to say, why do you have that in there? We got to take that out. So again, when we use AI to help develop our content, things like creating case studies or refining some of our content, it's a great starting point that we can use to give for ourselves, for a client, for a stakeholder, something to react to instead of, Brian mentioned this earlier, staring at a blank screen where you're like, I don't even know where to start. It helps us kind of get that boost to get going. So I want to share a few more examples of how we can use AI to develop content. I mentioned we could use it to develop handouts or resources. So we have a client that has a whole lot of supplementary materials that are part of their e-learning courses. And in this situation, we needed to have a resource that was a template to help learners create a community asset mapping that they had learned about within the e-learning course. And so the client said, here's some things that I kind of like what they're, I like this as an example. We had the content from the course. And so we were able to feed that into AI and say, could you help us create this template? And it did. And not only did it offer to give us, create the template, it said, hey, would you like a visual version of that? And I was like, yes, I would actually. And so it creates this visual version. But again, this highlights a perfect example where we need a human. So when we further inspect it, you'll see that it says services off, and it really should be services offered. And then that header, it was close how this asset supports library services, but really the content was about community asset mapping. So how does community asset mapping support library services? It was not quite there. And then it generated a PNG, which was not super helpful to me and made it look like there's a whole extra page when there really wasn't an extra page. And so it's kind of awkward. And so we find that there are, there's small errors that the AI will make that we need to use our human element to review and make sure that we're paying attention to that. In this case, we were able to feed it a few more prompts and then generate a fillable PDF that learners could use to have a template that they needed to go along with this content. But again, as with all things AI, you'll hear us say this a lot, we need to have that human element. So a couple of cautions when we think about developing materials. AI will often repeat the same activities, so we want to make sure we're looking at the output to make sure it has the variation that we want. It also makes those little mistakes that on the surface they look fine. But when you're really reading it through, the combination of words doesn't really make any sense. It might look professional, but it doesn't quite make sense. And also when we're developing, we want to make sure we're reviewing for diversity and character inclusion. Unless you tell it to, it will often use the same names over and over. So my bots often produce the name Jordan. Yours might produce something different, but unless we need to prompt it and say, hey, I need some variation when it comes to those characters to make sure we're getting the diversity and the representation that we want. So I'm going to move us right along into implement. I know this is a lot of information, but when we think about how AI can be a thought partner in implementation, it can be helpful in things like creating personalized learning paths or creating an implementation plan. You might ask it to identify challenges and potential barriers to implementation so that you can think through how you might mitigate those in advance. And we have an example that we'll share on the screen of a client who's rolling out an e-learning program to their organization that includes 52 locations. So there's a lot they need to think through with this e-learning launch. And we asked AI to help us create a rollout plan. And it has a lot of really robust information, things you think about pre-launch, launch and execution phase, the post-launch, key considerations throughout the process. And in this case, it was too much. We needed to help give it some more information to help it refine down to a rollout plan that actually made sense. And so, as with all of these steps, we can't forget the human element. When we use AI, it needs a strong human touch. And especially when we're using AI, when we're creating implementation plans, we want to use a lot of refinement and parameters to help make sure it stays on track. I know a lot of us use Copilot. Microsoft calls it Copilot because you are still the pilot, right? Whatever AI generates, you still need to deliver and be accountable for. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather to talk a bit about evaluation in AI.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So evaluate, as Brian mentioned earlier, this is something that we might be doing, throughout all of the ADDIE steps. This is, I think, one of the most crucial parts of instructional design because the evaluation is where we can actually provide our stakeholders with really critical information about the effectiveness of their training investment. So generative AI can help you design meaningful diagnostic questions, for example, and this is something it does really well. So instead of asking, a survey question of how satisfied were you with this training on a scale of somewhat to extremely or whatever, you can ask it to create a post-training evaluation form that goes beyond satisfaction. So I have a prompt here, and I think Rachel's going to stick that in the chat for you as well, asking our AI to create a post-training evaluation form that goes beyond satisfaction. So we're prompting it to create 3 confidence questions using a Likert scale. Somebody in the chat mentioned, if you can give it some frameworks, that really does help. Remember, it's predictive, right? So if you're linking to Likert scale, for example, it will do a good job of drawing on that. We're also asking it to create 2 intent to apply questions. So asking specifically how your audience plans to use the skills in the next week, year, whatever, and asking it also to create barrier questions. So what might stop someone from using those skills? It does a really great job of coming up with that information, and then go ahead. I think we have a screenshot. You can also prompt it to create the documentation in whatever format. So, you can ask, for example, for a formatted Word document, you can ask it to format like something for a Google form. Now, frequently you'll have to pull that over into a form yourself, but it will lay everything out for you. Or there are applications that will actually build these things for you and do the sort of graphic design. So there's the prompt in the chat. Thanks, Rachel. Another place that I love to use AI for evaluation is to give our supervisors a resource of observable behaviors that they can look at to see if the objectives from the training were actually being applied on the job. Um, so I think this is really useful and key here to see if our training is being applied IRL. So we are asking it here. I need a one-page resource for supervisors to help them evaluate if their employees are using the attached training. So we ask it to generate an observation checklist and a 5-minute coaching script, and it will do this quite well as well. And I think Rachel's got that in there. Thanks, Rachel. So this is what came out for us when we tried this out. And if you're in charge of QA, for example, operationally, this can be really helpful. Speaking from experience. All right, and third here, they are so great with, I'm not a very good person, admittedly, with numbers and and I really have come to rely quite a lot on generative AI to help me build data visualizations that actually demonstrate ROI, show performance, show the business value of the training, and actually show us where training is currently falling short and where we maybe need to implement more training. So the prompt that I've used for that is I need to present the impact of our recent, for example, sales training to the C-suite. I have data showing that employees who took the training increased their closing rate by 12% within 2 months. So I'm taking that data from like our Power BI dashboards, for example. And then I'll ask it to write a brief executive summary narrative of 3 bullet points that highlights the ROI. This is great for, if you have a very short amount of time in a call to present to your C-suite or your stakeholders what's going on with the training. So Rachel's got that in the prompt for you. And you can put in whatever data you want. You can ask it to give you instructions for how to create the visualization in Excel, for example. So it's even suggesting here that you do a clustered column chart comparing training versus untrained closing rates. So maybe your before and your after. ROI, sorry, Christine, return on investment. That's right. Okay. And the human element, let's talk about that finally next. There can be, we can add training to a lot of things, but drawing on qualitative interviews and instructional knowledge, sometimes we understand as humans that low engagement in training isn't always about the training content, that it can be a symptom of a deeper systemic issue. We can implement trainings for all kinds of things, but if there is something happening at an organizational level, no amount of training is going to solve that. I would also say from a value perspective, the human is the person who can look the CEO in the eye, read those nonverbal cues, gauge their reaction, and really determine the right way to phrase suggested solutions, or maybe to share problematic findings. We are able to soften the blow, as it will, or sell a need for something in a way that AI cannot do. And finally, I think really the human evaluator can focus the findings on systemic fixes in organizational development. And we can take that blame away from, potentially, if there's blame there, the tendency to blame an individual. We can make sure that we refocus why an outcome or a number looks the way it does. And really, it's our job to ensure that our training programs maintain support. So we're very, very crucial in this space.
Thank you, Heather, for that. And well, actually, before I wrest control back, there was one question that was asked in the chat, and it was something that we had actually talked about a little bit yesterday. And the question was, does AI actually create the data visual, or do we take that suggestion and then create it on our own?
Oh, from Christina. Hi, Christina. Great question. Yeah, so there are some sites that can create sort of a visual for you. But if you want to create something within like Power BI, because that's what you're using, I'm not sure if Copilot is quite doing that for you yet. Um, does anyone know? Has anyone played around with Power BI and Copilot?
And
But
I haven't seen any thoughts about Power BI and Copilot. I know that some people are saying that ChatGPT is integrated with Canva, and
yeah.
sometimes you can get that visualization. One of the things that you
Mhm.
mentioned when we were having this conversation yesterday was that certain AI tools do this better than others. And so, in the example that you actually offered here on the screen. This is what a lot of the most common tools will offer you as a first option, right? Here's how to do it. This is how you should set it up. Now go to Excel and do it. But there are some tools and some integrations that seem like they actually will generate that whole visual experience.
Yeah, that's right. And this is an area I think that's really vastly developing too, because organizations are seeing a need, right? So we're seeing that its ability to create meaningful images really develop quite quickly.
So, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Erin, for sharing a little bit of your experiences and using this for different steps along the way of the instructional design process. Now, I'm kind of curious with the rest of you, and I'm wondering if anything that we were talking about here has helped to spark some thoughts or some ideas of how you can use AI as you start to navigate some of your instructional design projects. And so we don't have breakout rooms, but what we're going to do, and as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, that lightning bolt is disappearing over the course of 30 seconds. And so what we're going to do is kind of a speed round. And what I'd love to do is to go step by step through the instructional design process and find out what prompts could you use at each step of the way, maybe some of the things that you typed into your note page. And so you can copy and paste those in when we're kind of talking about this activity. One of my colleagues was like, I don't think I would be able to do that in 30 seconds. But if you've actually written down some thoughts in terms of prompts that you could use in your own projects and you'd like to share those, that would be really helpful. As we saw here, the way that we prompt things can really make a big difference in terms of how helpful AI is for us. And so let's go ahead and start with this first one. Do you have, or did anybody take any notes, specific notes, in terms of prompts that you would use to help you analyze a potential training need? Go ahead and drop those into the chat, and we'll see what people are coming up with here. That lightning bolt started to disappear a little bit too fast to give people time to actually write some things down. And actually, what perfect. I'm seeing Gail has a lot of them. So if you'd like to share some of those, great, Gail. But I'm starting to see some things that people are putting in there. Um, the images are, yes, when it comes to images, yes, I end up with six fingers very frequently. All right, so keep typing in prompts that you would use for analyze, and I'm going to go on to the next step here and ask if you put any prompts in there for how you might use AI to design a potential training solution. What prompts might you use? What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to grab the prompts that people are putting here and try to compile those. And if it is something that we're able to do in a relatively reasonable amount of time to turn this around, it's something that we could share with everybody else too. So if you're able to contribute to the conversation, we're going to generate something that could be bigger than any one of us and could be really helpful for the whole networking community that we're building here. I'm going to move on to develop. If you had any prompts in there for how you might use chat, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or other tools to develop a training program or instructional design project, go ahead and drop those in. I love some of these examples. Create a 1 hour webinar on this topic. What is easy to learn to help accomplish dot, dot, dot. Create a lesson plan for early childhood teachers on the subject of child abuse prevention. These are like what you're putting in here could be really helpful, and it's really easy for us to swap out a specific topic for another one. But I love the way that people are crafting these prompts. What is a prompt you could use to help you implement a training program? What might be some prompts that people have put in here? I'm just looking at some of the develop pieces using X tool, suggest development for Plan Y, develop a course outline. All right, so with implementation, I'm seeing visuals, physical, and PowerPoint. Um, list the items crucial to accomplish. One of the things that I like with the implement is also what are the generate some handouts based on this information or format this PDF in a way that people will actually be able to take notes, things like that. And finally, uh, what is a prompt you might be able to use to help you evaluate the effectiveness of your program? So this is just kind of a quick round of prompt sharing that hopefully we're going to be able to compile some of these thoughts here. Lynette is just copying and pasting her entire note page. I love that. Thank you so much, Lynette, for kind of letting us see what is what was helpful in here. Create participant guide that includes definitions and practical examples of steps using X assessment for early child. I love all these examples. Please keep them coming. And with AI, we have these prompts. We don't want you to forget about the human element. Now we have come to the end of our time here. Thank you so much for sticking with us throughout the course of this hour. It's flown by. Don't leave quite yet because we have a few things and we have some giveaways here as well. The first piece that I'm just going to make sure that you are aware of is that the holidays are coming and my schedule isn't super full right now. And so if you find yourself in a similar situation, I would love to grab virtual coffee, nerd out about AI or any other type of training. So there is a QR code right there on your screen that will take you right into my calendar, and we can talk about whether it is train the trainer, activities that can help engage people in training, or nerd out about whatever it might be when it comes to training or some of the challenges that you might be having. The other thing that I want to mention is that we are working on filling up our calendar in the new year. We're able to deliver these free sessions in part because we have clients who develop e-learning or instructor-led training with us, and we're also able to work with organizations that bring me out to deliver training. Now, if you find these sessions to be helpful and you work for an organization or maybe you're part of a professional association that sometimes brings in speakers and there's a need around training design or training delivery skills, drop a note into the chat that says, ask me. And that's all you have to say. We will have that note and we'll come back and we'll reach out because we'd love to talk more about the opportunity and how to bring these messages to folks that may not be exposed to this, but could be really helped by whether it comes to training design or training delivery, things like that. All right. Next month, as a reminder, we do have part 2 of this webinar. So today we shared a lot of information. Next month, we're actually going to do something with that information. And so we would love for you to join us. And heads up, there will be breakout rooms in that session. Actually, it will be primarily breakout rooms as you're working through a real life challenge. Now, if you would like to connect with Endurance Learning, you have a QR code right there on your screen that brings you right to our LinkedIn page. We also have a tool, speaking of AI tools, this tool is specifically to help people develop better training faster. And so you don't have to actually figure out what the prompts are. It will do that for you, and it will generate training in minutes, including an instructor guide and slides. And so there is a website that you can see right there. There's also a QR code that will take you to some more information. If you would like to get in touch with us, you have the Endurance Learning LinkedIn QR code right there, but we also have our email addresses, and we would love to hear from you at any point about anything that we've talked about today. Thank you all for sticking with us over the course of the past hour and kind of sharing your information in the chat as well, being part of the conversation when it comes to AI with purpose. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Happy training, everyone.